And with that, I think we can go ahead and kick it off. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Planning for Clean Pupil Transportation webinar. This webinar is aimed to help school districts and people involved with electric and clean school buses figure out what steps to take once you've applied for the EPA funding. We'll also be giving a brief overview of that EPA funding as well. Now, for today's agenda, we have 5 speakers. First, we'll hear from Chuck Feinberg with New Jersey Clean Cities. He'll be telling us a little bit about the Clean Cities Network, as well as the Mid-Atlantic Electric School Bus Experience Project, and some details about that EPA funding. Then we'll hear from Howard Harris with VEIC, who will talk us through the intricacies of charging your electric school bus. Up next, Claire Alford with Highland will be talking to us about the Highland model and how it can help school districts sort through the complexities of electric school buses. And then we'll hear from Albert Burleigh with Bluebird. They'll tell us a little bit about Bluebird's specific offerings and how that they can work with the EPA funding. And last but not least, we'll be hearing from Deborah Coles, the Director of Transportation Safety and Security with Louisa County, Virginia Public Schools, who've been operating electric school buses in their fleet since early 2021. As I mentioned, we'll be holding Q&A at the end of the session. So please use that chat, or not the chat box, the Q&A box to submit your questions as we go along. And if you could indicate who you would like to be answering that question, that would also be super helpful. And with that, I will turn it over to Chuck Feinberg to begin.
Feinberg. I run the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition. And for those who are not familiar with the Clean Cities program, it is a program that is run out of the Vehicle Technologies Office of the U.S. Department of Energy. And it's a fairly unique program the way it's set up. And you can go to the next slide, Sarah. The way it works, where most federal programs are top down, this is kind of ground level up, and these coalitions and the Clean Cities coordinators are kind of the boot where, again, unlike most programs within the Department of Energy and the Vehicle Technologies Office, which are mostly R&D related and developmental related, our program is deployment related. So the Department of Energy has established through a formal process Clean Cities coalitions. There's about 85 of them across the country. As mentioned, I run the New Jersey Coalition, which is an independent nonprofit, and we cover the entire state of New Jersey. And the mission of the Clean Cities Coalitions is, as with the whole program, is to advance the affordable domestic transportation and fuels and technologies industry. Our mission is essentially to do everything that we can to reduce petroleum in the transportation sector. So that is through the education and the outreach, and through development of public-private partnerships, help secure grants and other funding opportunities for anything having to do with the deployment of alternative fuels, alternative fuel vehicles, idle reduction programs, trip elimination programs. And I spoke at a conference this morning and made the point that my mission is to take the word alternative out of alternative fuels. And we're making a lot of progress in that. And you know, as I said this morning, it wasn't that long ago that I personally knew every driver of a plug-in vehicle in the entire state of New Jersey. And right now there's about 65,000 of them. So obviously we've made a lot of progress. There's a long ways to go. And but you know, the way we do this is to support the development of markets for these alternative fuels, to bring people together from all ends of the supply chain, all spectrums, whether it's fleet managers or fuel providers or infrastructure providers, and in all different sectors. Now, I'm not going to read these slides. You can see them yourself, but you can go to the next one, Sarah. So within our portfolio, as I mentioned, is all types of vehicles. You know, when I first started doing this, there were very few options available for light duty vehicles, and we focused mostly on medium and heavy duty. But now those options have expanded with electrification, and you know, we work with all different fuels and different infrastructure. As I mentioned, idle reduction programs, which is actually extremely important in the school setting and the school buses. And we are working with new mobility options, including things like electric bikes and last mile delivery technologies and all that. And cumulatively, the Clean Cities coalitions and our stakeholders over the years of our existence have reduced energy consumption by over 10 billion gallons of gas gallon equivalent of petroleum. So quite a track record. We have a driven approach, and our partners have done very well working with us on our efforts. Next slide. And again, the Clean Cities coalitions and the coordinators are kind of the center of bringing all these various tools through the technology integration program of the Department of Energy, and bringing that to the local level and bringing it to our stakeholders. So whether it's technical assistance with the significant resources of the national labs and case studies and all of that, training, outreach, and bringing people together for various partnerships, various information and tools that I'll get to in a second. And of course, what makes the world go round is the financial assistance. You know, being new technologies, they do cost a little bit more upfront, particularly electric buses. They do cost of ownership, especially with the price of gasoline and diesel these days. It's increasingly making sense, but the upfront cost, we still do need some financial assistance. So the coalitions try to keep their finger on the pulse programs or federal programs that are available to help out fleet managers in school districts and school bus contractors. Next slide. So I don't know about you folks, but I'm a big Seinfeld fan. So I like to use this slide where George's worlds are colliding, excuse me, with electric school buses and all vehicle electrification. This is where all the things that are coming together. You know, as fleet managers or as school bus transportation coordinators, I'm sure you never really gave much thought to a lot of the things that are on this slide, but all this, the technology is evolving. These are things that have to be thought about, whether it's directly by you or consultants that you use or coalitions or third parties that you might want to contract with. So this is where it all comes together. Next slide. And just real quickly, what brings us together today is what we call the MEEP program, which Sarah, you might have to help me out. It's the Mid-Atlantic Electric School Bus Experience Program. I think I finally got it. So this is a Department of Energy grant that is actually run by Virginia Clean Cities, and we're partnering with other Clean Cities coalitions throughout the region. So it's Virginia, Pennsylvania, DC, Maryland, and New Jersey, and as well as some other parts. And the whole idea is to bring the electric school bus experience to the local school districts, the local stakeholders that are part of this decision-making process. And we're doing a series of ride-ins. We're doing a series of events so that the school districts and the school staff can actually experience these electric vehicles and get a feel for them, learn what's necessary, do fairly high-level route analyses. I could tell you, with current technology, you do have to think about the routes that are in your system. The large majority of your existing routes are probably appropriate for electric school buses, but it is worth taking a look at. As well as the charging infrastructure. There's many considerations to bring to the table to think through. And it's not just a matter of going out there and buying a new school bus. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into this, and this program helps surface those and will help you work through those issues as you face them. Next slide. So again, part of the Clean Cities mission is education and outreach. The Department of Energy has tremendous resources available to that end. If you go to what's called
Okay, I think we lost your audio. So I'll give you just a brief second. Hopefully you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Nothing changed on my end. But anyway, I was saying that the Alternative Fuel Data Center is a great resource that you should look at. And recently, this electric school bus education series of YouTube videos has been added to it. I highly recommend you take a look at that and go through that. A very good amount of information there that's very relevant to what we're talking about today. And next slide. Speaking of funding opportunities, the EPA National Clean School Bus Program is open and accepting applications now. I'm not going to get into a great level of detail about it, but you should know that it's out there. As you see on the chart here, there are different funding levels available depending on where the buses are located. Each state or each EPA region, here in New Jersey, I'm in region 2, but I think the rest of this program is free of EPA. So take a look to see what the priority districts that have been identified are. These are primarily, I forget the exact criteria they use for to designate priority districts, but it's a combination of low-income districts and rural districts. So there's funding that the first level of criteria is to be one of these priority districts. And then as you see, depending on the type of vehicle that you are seeking funding for, there are different funding levels. And just keep in mind also that this Clean Bus program is not just for electrification, it's for other fuels as well. Obviously, the bulk of the money, the incentive goes to electrification, and that recognizes that the incremental cost of electric school buses is that much higher. From what I understand, once the priority district applications have been awarded and reviewed, if there is funding left over, then they go to the other school districts that are not considered in the primary designation. And next slide, I believe is my last slide.
I think we may have lost your audio again.
This was my last slide, so why don't I quit while I'm ahead?
All right, thank you so much, Chuck. I think we have the last slide with contact information. And as we go through at the very end, I'll also provide everyone my contact information. Since we do have a number of speakers today, everyone can reach directly out to me as well, and I can get you connected with who you need to be connected to. So thank you again, Chuck. All really great information. And with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, Howard Harris with VEIC. Howard, you can go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks, Sarah. Howard Harris from VEIC, Senior Consultant in our Clean Transportation Division. and really excited to get a chance to present to you all today on some of your charging options and some considerations you may want to make as you're looking at potentially electrifying your fleet. Next slide. So just a little real brief background on VEIC. We're a nonprofit organization, founded in 1986, based out of Vermont. And really, we're driven by purpose to committed to impact. We're really here to generate the energy solutions the world needs. And we do that by working with organizations across the energy landscape to create immediate and lasting change, serving as an objective partner for our clients as they do navigate energy challenges, and then understanding that every challenge is different, but our commitment is the same to make an impact. Next slide. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of your charging options, ESP charging options. I want to start with talking about kind of what some of the charging infrastructure is out there for you, and have it, start that discussion. Next slide. So really, there's three types of chargers for your buses. You have AC level 2, mid-powered DC, and high-powered DC. So AC level 2, we'll start with that one. That uses alternating current. Power is up to 19.2 kilowatts. Charging time somewhere around 6 to 8 hours. Requires single phase power. And the purchase cost is about $3,000 to $5,000. Installation $3,000 to $10,000. Next thing. The mid-powered DC is a step up. Uses direct current. Power is approximately 25 kilowatts. Charging time between 4 and 6 hours. There's an optional 3-phase power, and the cost is a little bit more expensive. Purchase $10,000 to $15,000. Installation $4,000 to $25,000. Next slide. And then you have the high-powered DC, which uses direct current. Power is a much more from 50 to 125 plus kilowatts. Charging time is about 2 hours, so much shorter. Does require 3-phase power. And as you'd imagine, it costs a little bit more. Purchase price around $40,000 up, and installation about $30K and up. Next slide. Now, obviously, those are the types of charging stations you could have, charging equipment you can have on site. However, how that charging station is set up certainly does impact your operation. And so you can go with a couple different ways, networked or non-networked. So obviously in a network charging station, you monitor and manage charging from a distance. It's easier to set the charging schedules and limits to reduce your electric bills. It does require internet access, and it usually requires annual subscription fees because it's being managed. Non-networked is much simpler, as you could imagine. It's less expensive to buy and maintain, less oversight, flexibility in how they're used, and it will require greater hands-on application for the staff, as that requires more staff management and engagement. Next slide. So as we're looking at other considerations, okay, the first step is, hey, you say, I want to electrify my fleet. I want to go down the road of getting an electric school bus. Well, the first call needs to be to your power company. Next slide. What power is going to be available at my facility? We encourage folks to call the utility as soon as you really think about going electric, and really have questions already teed up for your utility to get to the answers that you really need. Assess your site for charging, get an explanation of your rates and ways that you can manage your fuel costs. If there's plans for future expansion, have that conversation. Manage charging. Are there programs that can help pay for facility upgrades or installation costs? And then certainly, what is the time frame for any necessary utility upgrades? What we believe is the sooner you get in contact with your utility, the better you can get to the real answers that you need to make sure that your facility is ready to even house an electric school bus. Next slide. So that's on the power side. As you're considering which charging station you want to go after, you want to think about 3 things: costs, operational flexibility, and site and vehicle restrictions. As you saw in the previous slides, I kind of went through some of the costs of the different charging solutions from AC level 2 all the way up to DC high powered. Those costs are different. They range quite a bit. So certainly based on your own operation and your own budget, that certainly needs to be taken into account. Obviously, higher power chargers will likely increase your electricity demand costs as well, especially if you plan on filling up during the daytime. Your operational flexibility. If you want flexibility to cover multiple long distance trips in a single day, you may have to go with a higher power charger. If you're going to be doing, just overnight charging, or, charging where it's not going to be such a high demand, then perhaps that lower power charger, that AC level 2 is a better fit for you. And then of course, site and vehicle restrictions. It's always going to be based on your own specific site and your own specific vehicle. So, you have to think about, is 3-phase power at our current bus lot? If it isn't, then that limits what we can potentially utilize. And then if you have a make or model of a bus that you prefer, can that bus accept an L2 charge, or does it have to be on 3-phase power? That will also factor into your decision on kind of what's the best solution for us. Next slide. Digging a little bit deeper into the bus side, you certainly want to figure out, how are we going to be using these electric buses when they get on the road? Unless we're just doing a full transit overhaul, they're probably going to be a trickle in of some electric buses while you still have your original buses on the road. So what routes are those buses going to go on? That's very important to understand with your route analysis. You also want to keep in mind that buses typically go, the typical Type C bus, the battery at a full charge is usually good for about 120 to 155 miles in most ideal conditions. That range can be affected via outside temperature, terrain, loading, and or driving style. So we really encourage you to do a really strong route analysis before ordering your buses, to understand, number one, how these buses are going to be utilized, and number two, how much power is going to be needed to actually power up these buses. Next slide. And then with electric school buses, once they're on our site, that asset is there. And, one of the big things that we hear about in the industry is, vehicle to grid and vehicle to building. Hey, we all know that school buses don't run every single day of the year. In fact, we know that summertime is, a few months. So during the times when those buses are parked, how can we utilize that asset to provide more value overall? And in certain cases, people are looking at utilizing these buses in a vehicle to grid or a vehicle to build model. And a couple of points on vehicle to grid. It enables an electric school bus to partially discharge its battery, to the grid while it's idle or plugged in. Ideally, it could save money for the utility and still allow for a fully charged vehicle when needed. Technologies are still new, more info needed on extra cost savings from the vehicle to grid, but many people are starting to look deeper into that. And it adds a lot of complexity to an electric school bus project. So the way we look at it is, let's make sure we get the buses on the road first. Let's make sure that the solution works on a road application before we start trying to figure out other ways to utilize these batteries. And then hopping over to vehicle to building, very much the same. It enables electric school bus to partially discharge its battery to an adjacent building while idle and plugged in. Could be useful for power outages and also potential building electricity peak shaving. And it's simpler to implement than V2G. So that's just something to consider. Next slide. And then as we're talking about the type of charging stations, network, non-networked, one thing you want to really think about is your managed charging. And that really refers to any strategy to control when the charging occurs and or the amount of charging done at any given time. The biggest goal of the managed charging is that it helps to minimize costs, such as your demand charges, as well as relieves a bit of a strain on the electric grid. Typically uses software to coordinate those charging schedules among multiple network chargers. So this would obviously be something that would be more of an application in a network charging solution. Next slide. And finally, kind of to speak to what Chuck spoke of before with the EPA's Clean School Bus Program, the $5 billion that's kind of been set aside for electric school buses and clean school buses. There's a lot of different programs out there, but one program I want to talk about today is WRI, the World Resources Institute electric school bus initiative. They have hired my firm, VEIC, to provide outreach, school district outreach, technical assistance, and additional resources where folks can, much like working with Clean Cities, folks can go to a centralized location and basically, hey, say, hey, I want to electrify my fleet. This is kind of where these are the resources that I want to get to. So there's a whole bunch of resources and things of that nature. The reason why I'm putting this slide up here right now is because currently in certain school districts, WRI has prioritized them based on a number of KPIs, whether it's income, rural, some of the things that EPA is looking at as well, and utilizing us to provide free technical assistance for those school districts to go start their path down electrification. So I would encourage any school districts that are represented on this call, feel free to reach out to me to find out if your school district is on that particular list. If it is, and you're looking for some potential technical assistance, VEIC could potentially help you down that road. So just want to make sure I put a plug in for that as well. And with that, that's it. I do appreciate you all taking some time. And certainly if there's any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or send them to the end. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Howard, for going into detail about those charging options. Up next, we'll be hearing from Claire Alford with Highland, and she can talk us about how to sort of navigate some of those complexities. And Claire, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks to the Virginia Clean Cities Coalition for letting Highland present on today's meeting. We're really excited, and the VCC is a great group in Virginia, and we utilize their resources, and hopefully they utilize ours quite frequently. So like Sarah said in the beginning, I'm on the market development team here at Highland Electric. I lead up community engagement for the Mid-Atlantic region. I'm based in Washington, D.C., so I cover D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and then I also cover Illinois, New York, Georgia, and Texas. So I'm literally all over the map. And what I focus in on my role is electric school bus education. And we can just go ahead and go to the next slide, Sarah. Awesome. So I'm assuming that this group has heard all of the great things about electric school buses. At some point, especially now, they're getting a lot more interest thanks to the EPA's Clean School Bus Program and a lot of electric school bus mandates that we've seen in a variety of states over this past legislative session. And so the question that some folks have is, well, if there are all of these benefits, then why aren't more fleets transitioning to electric school buses? And that's for a variety of reasons, a lot of which Howard touched on. And so I won't spend too much time on this slide, but I think there are some things that are worth pointing out, which is the obvious one is cost, right? Electric school bus is around 3 times the price of a diesel bus. But then there are also some complexity issues, and a lot of these also, like I said, Howard touched on, which is charge management, charging infrastructure installation, navigating a relationship with the utility, which a school district typically wouldn't have to do. That comes into play. They just are not operating on a big budget or with a big amount of staff. And then also these grant processes that they can go through at a state or a local or federal level can be a little bit complicated. And then there's also always risk and reliability, which is there is a concern for the reliability of the technology. And essentially the best way to summarize this slide is that we talk to a lot of transportation directors. And when you approach them and you tell them that for 3 times the cost of a diesel, you want to tear up their depot and trench wiring to their lot, install charging infrastructure, they go running to the door. Nobody really wants to do it. And rightly so, because their job is to deliver kids to and from school every day, and anything outside of that, it's a little bit risky, and they don't want that on their backs. So, and rightly so. So we can go to the next slide. And so the point being made here is that with this traditional model, that involves or encompasses this high complexity that I just touched on, as well as the prohibitive upfront costs. And then with the turnkey solutions model, It provides budget certainty, and it takes out some of that complexity. So like Sarah said, I'm going to talk about Highland's model today. I think it's a really great illustration for how this public-private partnership not only leverages some of the public money that's available, but also can help take away some of these complexities. But I just want to say before I touch on Highland, this is a model that we have, we have competitors in this space, and I think that I think we want to be a good market player and just see as many school districts transition to electric as possible. And so that's why we are focusing on this mass market education. So yeah, it's, I think, like I said, a good illustration of how some school districts may leverage this funding. So we can go to the next slide. So a little about Highland. We're a relatively new company. We were founded around 3 or 4 years ago. We are based in Boston, up in the North Shore, if you're familiar with the area, in Beverly. I'm sitting in our Boston office right now, and I'm looking out at the Beverly, Massachusetts school district, which is one of our projects, which is really exciting, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. But we are a private company backed by over $250 million in private capital. A lot of that comes from investors that are focused on environmental projects. And really, we would like to think that we're pioneering this public-private partnership model. And so what we do is we offer school districts an annual subscription style price that is guaranteed to be either cost neutral or offer cost savings relative to what they're paying for diesel now. So it gets rid of that first thing that I mentioned, which is the affordability aspect. And so our key offering, or our bread and butter offering, is called Highland Fleets. And it's really a 6-step process. It's everything from the beginning, where we help navigate the relationship with the utility. That is so important. Like Howard mentioned, we get all of the charging infrastructure installed. We get the charging infrastructure on the buses to the district. We help train their maintenance workers. We train their school bus drivers. We train the transportation director. So everybody is up to speed, and we're not displacing any jobs. And that's my favorite part, I think, of our model, because I think it's a transferable skill that, the maintenance workers and school bus drivers hopefully can take with them no matter what school district that they may move on to. After we get the buses out on the road, we help with the managed charging aspect. We've actually got a software where we can, from our computer, see where the buses are, how much charge they are, the whole kit and caboodle. And then after that, throughout the lifetime of our contract with the school district, if anything happens with the battery or the charging infrastructure, we would cover that cost. So it's a lot, and it all sounds too good to be true. And my next slide, if we can go to that, sort of shows how we can do this at a cost that's budget neutral, or in some cases offer cost savings. And that's by stacking a bunch of different value streams that all flow into to this price that we're charging the school district. So you can see them here. Some of these are obvious: fuel and maintenance savings on electric school buses. They have a lot fewer moving parts, and they're obviously fueled by electricity versus diesel. Any potential V2G revenue. I know that was something that Howard mentioned, and I actually wanted to highlight the Beverly project, the one that I'm looking at on right now. Last summer, we were able to help them participate in National Grid's V2G program. And I think they got around $8,000 or $9,000 back in revenue from that we passed right on to them, but we just helped them navigate that relationship in that program. So V2G revenue, volume pricing. Highland's the largest purchaser of electric school buses, so we can purchase at a volume that school districts sometimes can't. We can pass those savings on. And then I think a big one right now, just considering that the EPA's first round of funding is out, is grants and future incentives. So if there are any local or state or federal grants available or rebates, we can help a school district apply, or in some cases apply on behalf of. It kind of depends on the fine writing. And if they are awarded that money, then we can wrap those awards into the costs that we offer. So I know that is a lot, but hopefully that graphic there kind of lays it out in a clean way. And if we can go to the next slide. So one project I wanted to highlight, which is the largest school bus electrification project in the U.S. and is a Highland project, is our partner out in Montgomery County, Maryland. We are working with them to electrify their full fleet, which is around 1,500 vehicles over the next 12 years. We have already electrified their Bethesda depot. For those of y'all that are familiar with the area, there are about 15 buses out there and 25 chargers. We always over install chargers. And we have now broken ground on 3 of their other depots that will be electrified by the start of this coming school year, which is really exciting. And all of those Montgomery County or all of the buses that are at the Bethesda depot, I think as of a couple of weeks ago, all 15 were out on routes taking kids, which is really exciting. So that's our Montgomery project, and that's obviously a really big project. But this project that I highlighted earlier with Beverly, with the V2G, is a small project. They've got a fleet of like 30 school buses, so our model is able to be applied to big and small school districts alike. And I'll go to my last slide. So I just want to finish with Why Now, which obviously I know both Chuck and Howard mentioned, which is these federal incentives that are available through the EPA program. I think it's super exciting. And we're encouraging all school districts to apply, whether they think that in this first round they will have a chance or not, but especially encouraging these priority districts to apply. I think a lot of times the conversations that we've been having with the priority districts, folks will see that sometimes they just need, they're operating on a pretty low budget and they just want new school buses and they don't really care how they're fueled. So if we can ensure that those school districts are getting these new school buses so that they can transport kids, but they're also electric, I think it would be really awesome. So the federal incentives, there's also reliable products and major manufacturers, all of the OEMs. I see Thomas, Bluebird, they all have at least one electric school bus offering, and then they're the Lions of the world. At Highland, we're brand agnostic. We work with Thomas, we work with Bluebird, we work with IC. So, whatever a school district prefers, which they typically have their preferred type of bus, we can make that happen. And then the risk reduction, which is that this is technology, even though it seems new, and it kind of goes to Chuck's point that he's making about not seeing them as alternative fuels. It might seem new technology, but it's been tested on the road for quite some time now. So the risk and reliability is just going down pretty quickly. So I will finish there. And if we want to go to my next slide, it has my email there. It's just down in the corner. It's really small. But feel free to shoot me an email if you want to chat with me or be connected with somebody on the Highland team. We've got a really big and strong technical team here that's out on the ground with these vehicles every day. So if you just want to have a real candid technology conversation, then I can point you in the right direction and also reach out to Sarah. And I know she's happy to connect you all with me as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claire. We'd be happy to connect anyone who's interested with Highland or any other speaker on this call. And up next, we will hear from Albert Burleigh about some of the specifics about these technologies. And I'll just remind everyone to please go ahead and put any questions that you have in the Q&A box as we go. Albert, off to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for having Bluebird on this webinar today. I think I'm standing between the Q&A session, so I'll try to go through rapidly and leave time for folks to ask questions as well. So next slide. Just a quick recap of where Bluebird is on our EV deployments and our growth in EV. That map to the left where you see all the green states, that's where we've sold EV school buses. We're up to 30 states and 4 Canadian provinces. And I'm about to update this slide. We're right at about 1,200 EV sales since our introduction. And you can see from the sales chart on the right, most of those sales have been in the last 12 months. So, and it looks like something cut off a little bit there on the total volume, but that should say at the top bar, a little over 600 just in this year alone. So that's where we are on our sales and deployments. Next slide. I won't go over this in detail. Obviously, I think everyone's well versed on the benefits of electric school buses. We'll talk a little bit about reduced maintenance costs. which I think is a huge benefit. And of course, the grant funding we're talking about today, I have a little more information on that as well. So next slide. This is what we have available in our school buses. We're actually the only manufacturer that offers electrified school buses in Type C, Type D, and Type A, which will be on the next slide. But on the Type C and Type D, first off, on Type C, we offer up to 72 passenger. We actually can do up to 77 passenger in a few markets. I think Virginia may be one of those markets. We offer it in 2 different wheelbases and 3 different body sizes. It comes with a 155 kilowatt hour battery with range up to 120 miles. I'd say more practically, we're seeing on average, customers are getting up to about 100 miles when you factor things in like driving habits, terrain, and the use of heating and air conditioning. On the bottom is our all-American rear engine. Currently, we're the only provider who has this bus in the market. It's up to 84 passenger capacity. We offer it in 3 wheelbases and all odd body sizes for the rear engine product. Same battery capacity and same miles that are capable of as the Type C. Oh, next slide. This is our Type A through our partnership with Microbird. Their G5 is available as an electric school bus. Like ours, it's eligible or capable of V2G in that product. Their product has a 2-speed transmission, also gets over 100-mile range on a single charge. Reduced maintenance costs, like we'll speak of in a minute, and some other great features, including their standard 32-inch electric engine store. Next slide. Just real quickly, kind of want to go over the anatomy of a electric school bus so everyone can get a little bit familiar with the components they would see on one of these products. This is just a diagram on our rear engine product. We have the same components on our conventional products, our Type Cs, but they're laid out a little bit differently on that product. But let's go over some of the key major components real quick so you can get familiar with those. Next slide. First, the propulsion motor. We use the TM4 Sumo motor. It's pretty standard in the industry. It's a 315 horsepower motor. It is direct coupled to our rear drive axle. We do not use a transmission, primarily because transmission does a few things. It adds weight, it adds cost, and it adds maintenance. And we don't think it's necessary. We think the bus is way more responsive, has really good low end torque without the use of a transmission. So that's one key difference we have over other competitors. Next slide. The thermal management system. This component is very important, especially in markets that have cold temperatures in some of those climates. It has kind of a dual purpose, a thermal management system. First, it's responsible for controlling the temperature of the batteries, the drive motor, and the high voltage module. The batteries, for example, like to stay between around 70 and 80 degrees where they're most efficient. And the thermal management system actually runs coolant through the batteries as well as the drive motor and really tries to keep them at temperature so the bus, again, is the most efficient possible. The other job of the thermal management system is to provide heat to the cabin. And it does that with 3 heaters. Actually, it does it with 2 heaters. We have 3 heaters in the thermal management system. 2 of those heaters are dedicated to providing electric heat for those underseat heaters and the defrost and the entrance door heater as well. So it provides that heat for those components. And then the 3rd heater actually is the one that provides heat for the batteries and the motor and the high voltage system. So we recently updated our thermal management system. Actually, it's been almost a year now, and it provides really good performance in cold weather climates compared to our very first products, which just couldn't get the cabin warm enough in some of the coldest climates that they operate. But certainly we made a big improvement, and that's not an issue anymore. Next slide. The high voltage system. If you were to look at our rear engine bus and lift up the rear emergency or the rear engine compartment, you'd see a large box there, and that's a high voltage system. Really has a few different jobs. One, it has 3 AC chargers in that high voltage box. And if you're not familiar with AC chargers, yes, they're less expensive and they have kind of a slow charge, but they really aren't chargers at all. Really, they just kind of deliver energy into the bus, and the chargers are actually on the bus. they take that AC power and they convert them to DC power for the propulsion batteries. So that's one of the main functions of the high voltage system. Also, it distributes the power from those high propulsion batteries, converts them to AC power for the air compressor, power steering pump, and the main drive motor. And it's really just kind of a distribution point to get all that high voltage to all the components that need power on the bus. So it has a few different purposes. Another one is it actually provides power to the 12-volt battery, so through the propulsion battery. So what it does, the propulsion batteries are DC power. It actually goes to the high voltage system. It has a DC to DC converter. Kind of works like a 400 amp alternator you'd have on a regular bus. There's 200 amp to 200 amp DC to DC converters, and it keeps that 12-volt battery charged. Next slide. And of course, the propulsion batteries, we use lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and gel batteries. We have 14 of those on our bus. They are all mounted between the front and rear axle and between the frame rails where they're the safest, obviously. Each of those 14 batteries weigh about 170 pounds. So that with the system, you're looking at an electric bus that probably weighs about 1,000 pounds more than your typical diesel bus. The great news is all that weight is centered in the middle of the bus, really good control, down low, so you have really good driving dynamics and a low center of gravity. So that's another benefit that kind of contributes to the great driving dynamics of an electric school bus. These are 155 kilowatt hours, as I mentioned earlier. They will provide up to 120-mile range, but more practically in most applications, we're seeing an average of about 100-mile range on a single charge. Next slide. Okay, we talked about maintenance a little earlier. I want to kind of give you a quick review on what type of maintenance is required on an electric school bus. There isn't much. That's why you have such big savings in the maintenance sides compared to a diesel product. First, you have an air compressor that does require an oil change. The first one's at 6,000 miles, and after that, it's every 18,000 miles or 12 months. The drive motor itself requires no maintenance. All we ask is that you torque the hardware that holds it onto the bus about every 12 months. Other than that, it is maintenance free. The thermal management system, that does require maintenance, probably the biggest maintenance item on our product because there is coolant that runs through that product, and you have to drain and refill it every 5 years of 15,000 miles. So that is required. Then you have electric power steering. You have to check and maintain the fluid level every 12 months of the power steering. And then the battery system, those 14 batteries I mentioned require no maintenance. All we ask is that you torque the hardware that holds those batteries to the frame every 12 months or 20,000 miles. And that is the full maintenance schedule for an electric school bus, much different than what you're accustomed to on any kind of internal combustion engine product. Next slide. This is what we call the EV ecosystem or Bluebird Energy Services. We offer support really from start to finish for the life cycle of that product. I won't touch on these, but I will quickly touch on funding on the next slide. If you can go to the next one, Sarah. And I just want to provide a few more key points of the EPA Clean School Bus Rebate and then tell you kind of how we're supporting school districts. I'm not sure we covered all this in previous presentations, so I'll go over it quickly. For every public school district out there, you are eligible to apply for up to 25 buses. Priority school districts do get up to $375,000 per bus if they select an electric bus. Awardees will be selected from every state, with no state receiving more than 10% of the funding. So all model years and fuel types are eligible to be replaced, but if you have a 2010 model year or older diesel bus, you have to replace those first. If you don't have those buses and you have newer buses or a different fuel type, you can still replace them under this program, but they require that you only select electric as your replacement vehicle instead of the option of also propane or CNG. So there's some limitations on what you can replace based on the buses, or what you can purchase based on the buses you're going to replace. Again, this is a lottery system. It's not a first come, first serve. An applicant is not required to apply for the infrastructure funding. That's a great thing. While it makes it so easy, if you apply for electric school bus funding, or you will get, and you do get awarded, they will give you funding that'll cover your infrastructure as well. So if you're a non-priority school district, you'll get $13,000 per bus for infrastructure, or $20,000 per bus if you are a priority school district and get awarded. One last point I wanted to make, because a lot of people haven't picked up on this, the way the EPA is going to do the selection process, priority school districts applying for EV only have the highest likelihood of being awarded. So the way they're going to do the selection process, everybody who applies is going to be put into a randomized order, and then they're going to go down to select one customer from every state first. But the customer that's asking for EV only and they're a high priority district is going to be the one in the state selected first. So just keep that in mind. If you want to have your highest chances of being awarded in your priority school district, EV only is what you want to have in your application and not mix other fuel types with it. Next slide. So how we're helping school districts with these EPA rebate applications. Either your local Bluebird dealership or Bluebird can assist you with the EPA application process. We've been doing it for the last 2 weeks. We're very familiar with how it works and what's required. We can actually submit the EPA application on your behalf utilizing our own SAM.gov number if you choose to do that. Maybe you don't have a SAM.gov number, maybe you don't want to deal with the process of getting that, or you just want to hit the ultimate easy button to say, hey, Bluebird, please handle it for me. We can do that. We have an online survey. You enter your information right into that. It comes to us. We enter it into the EPA application portal, and then we send you a confirmation showing that you've applied for the funding. If you're awarded, the rebate will be passed on to you. It comes to us first, but it passed on to the school district who was awarded. We've also developed an EPA application quick guide as a resource. This is just a simple paper format, basically a PDF form that simplifies what's required for the application. So we think this is a good resource. For example, if you're applying and you want to go into the portal, you can collect the information first using this form. That way you don't have to go back and forth as you're filling out the application. And we can also assist with charging infrastructure. We at Bluebird have partners. Our dealer network has partners as well to provide information on the available chargers out there and also site assessments if that's needed. And last but not least, we do have this email address that we provide support through. So if you need any assistance, you can email grantsupport@blue-bird.com and tell us what kind of assistance you need. We'll contact you and help you through it. And I think that's my last slide, Sarah. And there's my contact information. So please reach out to me as well if you need anything or have any questions. Thank you.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Albert, for all that in-depth information about the buses themselves and then how people can work with Bluebird. We do have one more speaker, and I know we got a little bit of a late start due to our technology difficulties. So Deborah, I don't want you to have to rush as we go through your slides, but I just wanted to let everyone know if you do have to hop off, we are recording this webinar. We'll be sharing it on YouTube, and we'll send out an email with the recording afterwards. So Deborah, I will go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deborah Coles. I currently serve as the Director of Transportation for Louisa County Public Schools located in Central Virginia. We are a very rural, well, not very, but we're a rural school division, having one high school, one middle school, 4 elementary schools, serving about 5,500 students per day. We do operate 90 bus routes during the day, covering approximately 2,700 miles. Currently, we have 2 EV buses in our fleet. We've had those now for about 3 school years. And I say about 3 school years because right around the time that we received them or we received delivery of them, COVID-19 set in and schools were not in regular session. So this school year, the 2021-2022 school year, is the first year that we have had a full, and when I say full, I mean 5 days of in-person learning for all students. So what we've done, what we did, we acquired our 2 buses, is we put them because we weren't certain. We didn't know what to expect. We put them on the shortest routes we have, 1 elementary and 1 secondary. We do transport. Each elementary school has its own fleet of buses, and our secondary, middle, and high students ride together. So currently we have 1 bus that runs, 1 EV bus that runs secondary, 1 that runs elementary. And it has just been an awesome thing. We don't have any, we like to tell people at this point, we don't have any real data. Of course, we have data that we collect on a daily basis, but we don't feel justified in sharing that as the gospel data simply because we don't have anything to compare it to, number 1. And number 2, we don't feel like we really put the buses to a true test until this past school year. So initially, our two initial buses we acquired through a grant from Dominion Energy. Dominion Energy was responsible for putting in our charging stations that you can see there. Uh, and we've had no issues. There were one or two issues with the Proterra chargers in the very beginning, but the fortunate thing was we had two buses, we had two fully functional chargers. So if one charger didn't work, we would just move the bus to that one to get it charged. Our buses, the two EV buses, we charge them between the morning and the afternoon run, and we charge them overnight. It's not really necessary that we do that, in that we only use probably about 40, somewhere between 40 and 55% of our energy on each route. So there's enough energy left after that, we think, to run another route if we need to. However, we have not really truly put the buses to that kind of test. We will be acquiring two additional EV buses. Hopefully we'll receive them by the end of July and have them on the road when school opens in August. Now, those two buses will be put to the true test in that we're assigning them to our permanent substitutes who, well, at least one of them, who travel almost every route during the school year all over the county. So we'll really be able to see what that bus will do. The first two, we kind of pampered. We pampered them because, again, we didn't know. So our goal right now is to transition our entire fleet from diesel to gasoline and or electric. And, right now, all of the funding that we're seeing for electric buses is that gives us an opportunity to get that funding, but we have to give up a bus in order to get a bus. And my fleet is not cushioned enough that I can afford to give up anything. I need to hold on to what I have. So our community are just in awe of the fact that we have two electric buses. Everybody wants their child to be assigned to that bus route. So with the two additional ones coming, more students will have that opportunity. We're going to start using these buses on field trips. So again, other students can have the joy of riding on that electric bus. The drivers say, the quietness of the vehicle is both a blessing and a curse, in that they can actually hear all of the students' conversations. And as one driver put it, some of which I don't want to hear, but I can hear it because the bus is just that quiet. So, and the kids love it because, again, they don't have to yell to be heard by their friends, and it is appreciated. So, we have no complaints. The maintenance, the general maintenance, is second to none. We are realizing, savings in excess of well over $5,000, and that's just general maintenance, excess of $5,000 per year per bus. We've not had any issues with the two that we've had on the road. There have been a couple of recalls that were taken care of by the manufacturer. We did have one breakdown that I think was just us pampering the bus a little too much in the very beginning and being afraid that we were going to break it if we, just went on and did what we were supposed to do. So as we continue with the electric buses, I can see us going more to the gasoline than the electric, simply because, going back to what I said, we just don't have the fleet enough to give up a bus to get a bus. So we would love to go electric, but if we've got to give up a bus, we can't afford to give up a bus because we need them for spares. Not necessarily for the routes, but we need them for spares, because anything man-made we know is not going to always work. I don't know what else I included, but I would encourage anyone, please know your terrain, please know your area. And, what I like to say is, if the grant fits your budget, then go for it. If you can make that grant work for you and your division, then go for it. I don't see how you can go wrong with the electric bus. I just also cannot afford, or we cannot afford, to give up a bus to get a bus. But we do have some we give up, but nobody wants those. So we'll just thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions that I can answer, I would be more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Deborah. It's great to hear from a school district with experience, especially your experience having had the bus since early 2021. We do have a couple of questions that have been submitted to the chat, so I will send those out. And as we go, I'm going to put up my contact information. If anyone has any questions or needs to get connected, please email me at stalcup.jones@vacleancities.org, and I will get you connected. So the first question that we have is, this is to any of the Clean Cities coordinators on the line. This is from Stuart Powell saying that my county doesn't have a Clean Cities coalition for this area. What would you recommend on helping out the school district regarding technical assistance and other questions the district may have? Now, Chuck, since you were our designated Clean Cities speaker, I can let you answer that. You can go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah, can you repeat that question?
Yes, so they were asking if your school district or your organization lies in an area that doesn't have a Clean Cities Coalition assigned to them, who would we recommend them to reach out to if they had questions or wanted technical assistance with their buses?
I would reach out to the nearest Clean Cities Coalition. Either they would help you directly or they would refer you to others that might be in your area. And just thinking about it, I'm not sure. Are there, within the Mid-Atlantic region anyway? I don't believe there's any gaps in coverage of Clean Cities Coalition. There may be, but I'm not. I don't think so. I mean, I know I cover the entire state of New Jersey, and I know pretty much all the rest of them are covered as well. So. But short answer is reach out to the nearest Clean Cities Coalition and they'll point you in the right direction.
And also being from Clean Cities, I would agree with that. I know that there are some gaps out in the Midwest and sort of some of the Western areas. A lot of Clean Cities coalitions are here to help even if you're not in their specific territory. So like Chuck said, reach out to someone who's near you, and if they can't specifically help you out, there are large networks of other organizations like VEIC or WRI or things like that that we can get you connected with for that assistance.
Yeah,
Thank you for that great question.
You'll find that Clean Cities coordinators have a problem with saying no. So even if it's not in their territory, I'm sure they'll be willing to help you.
So thank you, Chuck. The next question we have is for Claire, and I just want to flag that if anyone does need to hop off of our speakers, which it looks like Claire might have had to hop off, but she answered them in the chat. I'll just answer them, ask them and answer them so everyone can hear them. The first question was, are the maintenance costs covered by Highland on the buses limited to the batteries, the electric drivetrain, including batteries, or the entire bus? Claire responded saying that with the Highland fleet subscription, 100% of all of the repair costs would be covered from bumper to bumper, and the charging infrastructure would be covered, including parts and labor as well. Another question that we received for Highland was, are these types of turnkey options available for electrification of other school district vehicles beyond school buses? So Highland is always willing to have a discussion about this. Right now, they are specifically pursuing school buses. But if you have an interest, Highland would love to talk to your fleet about what your specific circumstances, because oftentimes charging infrastructure can be used for multiple fleets at once. So that could definitely be integrated in. And then the last question we received at the moment is for Deborah. This is from Katie Henderson asking, what kind of miles per day are your two buses typically doing?
So one of them, thank you. One of the two buses runs about 60 miles a day, right around 58, 59 miles a day. Well, one route, a round trip. So it'll double that to get a day. And the second one runs, let me see, 30 and so the second one runs 60 miles a day. So about 120 miles one bus and 60 miles the other. That's both trips, morning and afternoon.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Deborah. And thank you, Katie, for submitting the question. And I don't see any other questions coming in. So thank you, everyone, for hanging on with us. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning. But I would just like to thank all of our great speakers for being here with us today, and all of the great attendees, and for everyone who submitted questions. Like I said, we will be sending out this recording in the future. So if you want to re-review it or send it to your friends or other school districts, we highly encourage that. And if you have any questions, reach out to me at sstalkup-jones@vacleancities.org. And I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.